Speaker, Your Honor, the total appropriation for Last Mile School program is 6.5 billion, targeting around 361 last mile schools. However, a total of the 5 billion of the 6.5 was realigned to support the Bayanihan Act, leaving a remaining 1.5 billion for the last mile schools. And this will only cover yung 1.5, 88 schools to date. Kaya DepEd is still waiting for the issuance of the SARO from the DBM. And, according to the department, the SARO was released yesterday. So, tingnan natin from the DepEd side kung nasama yung mga request nyo for as long, of course, subject to all the requirements that you have to meet. Pag nasama yon, I'm sure all schools in the country that needs urgent rehabilitation and upgrading will be considered.
Mr. Speaker, kagalang-galang na sponsor, pag hindi makasama ang mga paaralang lumad sa programa ng DepEd, pwede bang tulungan ang mga lumad para maibalik ang mga paaralang lumad sa mga komunidad? Dahil po, Mr. Speaker, kagalang-galang na sponsor, sa panahon po ngayon napakahirap po ng ating sistema ng edukasyon. Nakikita po natin ang paghihirap ng mga guro sa mga publikong paaralan dahil sa module classes, dahil sa pandemya. Sa aming mga komunidad, ipagmamalaki namin na wala talagang COVID doon. At magpapatuloy sana ang mga bata sa pag-aaral kung hindi ipinapasara yung aming mga paaralan. Ginoong Speaker, ito yung mungkahi ko para sa DepEd family. Kagalang-galang na sponsor.
Madam Speaker, salamat po. And of course, we agree with the interpolator, Congresswoman Colyamat, and I can feel and empathize with her regarding her passion for access to quality education dun sa mga lumad. And I've said earlier, the requirements for the private schools are the same. The policy applies to all, and last mile schools ay hindi lamang para sa makatutubo but also kasama na sa mga isolated areas. So rest assured, Madam Colyamat, na yung sinasabi nyo ay i-address din ng Department of Education.
Maraming salamat, Madam Sponsor. Kasi po sa simula ng aming paaralan ay maganda po ang ugnayan sa DepEd at kinikilala, nire-respeto ng DepEd ang aming kultura na ang aming paaralan ay nakakaugat doon sa aming kultural na at pamamaraan sa pagtuturo batay doon sa nakasaad naman ito doon sa United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples at maging sa IPRA makikita natin ito na may karapatan ang mga katutubo na magtatag at mamahala sa kanilang edukasyon, no? Sa mga institusyon na nagbibigay sa edukasyon sa sariling wika at sa pamamaraang naaangkop sa kultural na pagtuturo at pagkatuto. Andyan yan sa Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act at sa United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Kaya ipinipilit namin sa DepEd na manindigan ang DepEd na ito kasi tungkulin niya na magbigay ng edukasyon sa lahat ng
Mr. Speaker, I move that we suspend session for a minute.
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker, kagalang-galang na sponsor.
Move that we resume session.
Session resumed. Representative from Bayan Muna Party List, please proceed.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker. No? May indigenous peoples, ulitin ko na lang yung aking tanong. May indigenous peoples education o DepEd na programa kayo ng DepEd na taon-taong pinupunduhan ng pamahalaan. Sa nakaraang hearing natin na na-mention nyo na dahil pinasaran nyo ang 176 na lumadnong paaralan na may 5,579 estudyanteng apektado nito ay dahil sa mga requirement na hindi naipasa agad. Bakit hindi binigyan ng konsiderasyon at tulong ang mga parang lumad na pinasara ng DepEd?
Mr. Speaker, Madam Yamat, the reasons for the decision of the region to close the school is because, number one, it does not comply with the curriculum standards set by the Department of Education. Ito naman is a policy not only to IP schools but to all schools, lahat na private at public schools. Pangalawa, allegedly, yung Taloponan brought their students away from their homes without the consent of their parents. Kaya yung mga parents then nagko-complain and use them to generate funds by making them perform certain activities in violation of DepEd's child protection policy. Pangatlo, yung teachers naman were not board passers, kailangan talaga licensure exam for teachers at saka board passers. That's one of the policies also of the department. Classes of the core learning areas are conducted by learning facilitators, which is also in violation of the Department Order Number 21 of 2000 Series to 2014. Ang pang-apat po, the school has been operating within the ancestral domain of the IP community without obtaining the mandatory free and prior informed consent of the concerned IP communities and certification preconditioned from the National Commission on Indigenous People. At saka the last would be some students do not have learner's reference number, also in violation of the requirements under the Department of Education Order Number 26 Series of 2015. Kaya po na-close. But if all of these requirements imposed by if it's all above board, nasa Department of Education naman, bibigyan naman sila, ma-reinstate naman for as long as mako-comply nila yung mga requirements. Ang Department of Education is always open to consultation, to discussions, So we would encourage the school, specific schools na na-close, to coordinate with your regional offices, the Department of Education, because I'm sure they will be given a chance to comply with all the requirements.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, sinasabi po namin na bago po nang itinayo ang aming paaralan ay maganda ang ugnayan ng DepEd at ng community. At nangyari lang ito noong 2014, paulit-ulit yun na itong sinasabi, na nang ideklara ng Presidente Noynoy Aquino ang Whole of Nation Initiative, ay bigla na lamang itong ganito ang ginagawa sa aming mga paaralan. At sa usapin po ng pre-prior and informed consent, ang mga paaralan na itinayo namin ay kami mismo ang nagtayo, kami mismo ang mga katutubo. Kailangan pa bang maghingi ng FPIC na lahat ng ang tumatayo ay kami mismo, no? Kaya Ginoong Speaker, no, kagalang-galang na sponsor, sinasabi namin na ang ginagawa naming pagpapatayo, no, sa aming paaralan, sa aming komunidad ay wala po kaming nalalabag na batas, bagkos nakasulat ito sa halimbawa doon sa United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, kasali sa deklarasyon ito ang Pilipinas. Isa siya sa nagpirma sa deklarasyon ito. At nandun din ito sa Indigenous Peoples' Right Act. Kaya ito yung direkta kaming nakipag-ugnayan sa DepEd. Ang masasabi lamang namin, no, batay sa aming paulit-ulit na sinasabi ang katotohanan, ay pilit-pilit itong ililibing sa paninira upang matabunan ang aming pinapahayag na katotohanan. Dito kami naging nakikita namin na ang tungkulin ng ating pamahalaan, tungkulin ng DepEd, ginagawa namin dahil ito ang pangangailangan para sa kinabukasan ng aming susunod na henerasyon. At tinuturing din namin ito na tulong namin. Hindi po kami nakipag-away, no? Kundi itinuturing namin ito na isang tulong namin sa gobyerno. Dahil hindi kami marating ng mga sosyal na serbisyo, nagsisikap kami ng aming inisyatiba at hindi kami nagtayo lamang ng aming sarili, kundi nakipag-usap kami sa departamento kung saan may tungkulin para sa edukasyon sa buong bansa, no? Kahit po ano ang sasabihin ng DepEd, no? Sasabihin pa rin talaga namin na malaki itong pananagutan sa pagpapasira ng mga paaralang lumad. Bakit kinakailangan ninyong ipasira ang paaralang itinayo sa sarili naming pagsisikap na nakabatay sa aming karapatan, magtatag at mamahala sa aming sistema ng edukasyon at institusyon na bibigay ng edukasyon sa sariling wika sa pamamaraang naaangkop sa aming kultural na pagtuturo at pagkatuto. Ito yung sinabi ko na kanina. Kaya Mr. Speaker, kagalang-galang na sponsor, hindi po kami mananahimik sa ganitong kalagayan dahil ito po ang totoo. Sinasabi namin na ang katutubo ay isang natatanging lahi ng mamamayang Pilipino na may sariling pamamaraan sa pagpapaunlad ng kabubuhay, pagpapaunlad ng kultural at iba pang mga karapatan namin mga katutubo, na ito ang palagi naming pinapanawagan ng gobyerno na irespeto, igalang ang aming karapatan sa sariling pagpapasya dahil bahagi kami sa Republika ng Pilipinas na makipagtulungan sa kung paano paunlarin ang ating bansa sa pamamagitan ng ating sariling kultura bilang mamamayang Pilipino. Mr. Speaker, kagalang-galang na sponsor, ito lamang po ang aking masasabi. Sana po maintindihan ninyo ang paninindigan ng mga katutubo na ang pagdepensa ng lupang ninuno, ito po ay bahagi sa ating pagtatanggol ng ating pambansang soberanya. Maraming salamat at magandang tanghali ulit, Madam Ginoong Speaker at kagalang-galang na sponsor.
Maraming salamat din po
Salamat
sa inyo.
din po. Salamat kaayo.
The Majority Floor
Kanya.
Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next to interpolate the sponsor, may we now recognize the Honorable Gentleman from the 1st District of Bohol, Representative Edgar M. Chato. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 1st District of Bohol is hereby recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Madam Sponsor. First, let me manifest my strong support to the budget of the Department of Education under Secretary Briones. There are some points, however, that I would like to clarify because in the meetings and hearings done at the committee level, I was raising already a question about the 2021 budget and the sufficiency of the funds that are being allocated for printed materials, learning modules of our learners in the different schools all over the country. I would like to know if the funds are actually sufficient as budgeted for 2021, especially in areas where connectivity of internet is not yet provided and they have to resort into modules and materials that have to be brought to the individual homes. Let me have that answer from the DepEd as far as the sufficiency of the funding for 2021 is concerned, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the good congressman from Bohol, Congressman Ed Chato, raised that concern because under the flexible learning option, one of the modalities is these self-learning modules. And tama kayo, it's not enough because the budget under the 2021 appropriation, GAB, is only 20 billion pesos. 15 under the regular and 5 billion under unprogrammed funds.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, how much was the fund proposed by the DepEd to fund this program? The totality of the funds that was needed.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker.
The Department of Education, considering for school year 2020 to 2021, will need 40 billion pesos, but only half of the requirement was approved under the GAB.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, during the committee hearing of the budget of DepEd, I raised serious concerns about the answer of our DepEd officials that the remaining funds needed for the printing modules, including in fact bond papers that are used by the students and the pupils, will have to be generated from the Special Education Fund, number one, and the Brigada Escuela. The Special Education Fund in local governments is not that much actually. It is only generated 1% from the real property taxes. And for small communities, especially in rural areas, this is very, very small amount. Larger maybe in cities where the real property tax is higher. In other words, we cannot really say that the SEF fund source. It could be supplementary, but not really a primary source of funds for this purpose. And the other source that was mentioned during the committee hearing is from the Brigada Escuela. I think everybody knows that the Brigada Escuela is only a mechanism of inviting people's support from the private sector, from NGOs, including parents, to be able to contribute, whether in monetary form or in labor, to the development of the schools, especially in far areas of the country. And again, what happens here is that in the Brigada Escuela, because of the lack of teaching modules or printing materials and the others, they resort to really soliciting already funds coming from the private sector. While the DepEd would say maybe that soliciting is not encouraged, but what can teachers do and the administrators of schools, for example, in rural communities, when they do not have resources enough for the printing modules, which are very necessary in areas that are not connected and cannot go in online education. With no face-to-face options, then the printed materials becomes a very necessary component of making our modality succeed. And so some teachers even use their own resources, their own money to be able also to buy those kind of printing materials. So Mr. Speaker and Madam Sponsor, I would like to bring back again into the plenary today our proposal to really look seriously into increasing the budgetary allocation. Proposal from the DepEd says 40 billion is being needed. And both unprogrammed funds and regular allocation only totals 20 billion. So practically we are only funding half of the requirement. it is my proposal, therefore, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman, who is now, rather our sponsor, Madam Sponsor, because both of us were of the opinion that we should be filing a resolution, and that's 1274, to ask the Appropriations Committee and urge the Appropriations Committee of the House to allocate additional budget, maybe 20 billion, to fund the full printing requirements of the self-learning modules and to implement the distance learning education of the Department of Education. So, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, at the most appropriate time when amendments will be accepted, I hope, and I also would like to appeal that this increase in budget is very, very necessary and should be included in the amendments. Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, may I hear your comments on this?
Mr. Speaker, I'm truly delighted to hear Congressman Ed Chato in support of the self-learning module and augmentation of its budget. Kasi totoo talaga, no? In fact, kaming dalawa ni Kong Ed proposed, no? There's a House bill currently filed in the House of Representatives appealing for the augmentation of the SLM for under the flexible learning option. So with the support of Congress, and of course, we seek again the support of our legislator to pass this supplemental budget for 2021. So thank you very much, Kong Ed. It's very timely, and the Department of Education is most elated with your proposal, and we know that this is all going to improve the quality of our education, and also the plan of the department to have a one-on-one SLM per student. No? That is really the plan of the department. Salamat po, Kong Ed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Madam Sponsor. Hopefully, and once this is carried out, our teachers can then focus on teaching. They can focus on teaching because they're adjusting to the new modality of teaching, and likewise will not be bothered by looking for funds and resources for printing materials that they can use for our learners. So another point, Mr. Speaker and Madam Sponsor, still related to our distance learning and our new modality of teaching. Our parents play a very important role with respect to guiding the students and the learners on the manner of maybe studying, interpreting, reviewing, and finally answering the different modules that are sent to their different homes. Incidentally, I think this was discussed by previous congressmen also, that we have different levels of educational attainment among our parents. Some can adequately provide the needed guidance. Many parents are not that well educated to be able to handle such kind of responsibility. I noticed that there was a rush program of hiring from the DILG, what we call contact tracers. And during our discussions earlier, we were also saying that we are looking forward to also have our mentors, what we call tutors, teacher tutors, can possibly be hired by DepEd. May I know the updates on this? And may we know also if there is already budgetary support on this plan? And when can we possibly start it? Is it last quarter under the Bayanihan Law, or will it be started still in 2021 budget?
Mr. Speaker, there is an ongoing orientation with the parents and guardians, and at the same time with the LSA, what we call the Learners Support Aids. And we know for a fact that this is really challenging circumstances right now. And all of these will be successful, made possible also with the support, cooperation, and trust, not only of the department from central office down to the region, division, but also the parents. No? So we have set up an academy, or the department have set up a parents academy, which is sponsored by the PTA. This is what
Thank
we
you
call
for
the
that,
true spirit
Mr.
of
Speaker.
bayanihan. As they say, it takes a village to educate a child.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor. So that will be a voluntary work on the part of parents to be able to undergo such kind of training. Am I right on that, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, tama po kayo, Kong Ed.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, and Madam Sponsor. Finally, my last point, do we have programs already existing in DepEd to implement the constitutional provisions on complementarity of the public and the private education? We noticed that a lot of private schools are bleeding as an effect of the pandemic. And in fact, it is observed that there is an exodus of teachers and students, in fact, from the private schools to the public schools. Do we have budgetary support in 2021 budget of DepEd for such kind of public-private sector complementation for the survival of the private schools? If yes, then how much is being allocated for 2021, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, the 2021 budget has 13 billion, around 13 billion for the GASPE program, what we call the Government Assistance to Students and Teachers in Private Education. However, this is not enough since the proposed budget of DepEd is around 32 billion and it was cut to more than half.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and Madam Sponsor. Of course, it's a reality that funds as of this point in time is really scarce, but we do hope that there are mechanisms also being studied to be able to save our private schools from closure. We do understand that each education is everybody's business, and both the public schools and private schools are recognized by our Constitution as complementing each other in providing quality education. So this remains to be an important concern. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, and I support strongly the budget of DepEd, and of course, congratulations to Secretary Liling Briones. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Gentleman from Bohol, the majority floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, next to interpolate the Madam Sponsor is the Honorable Gentleman from the 3rd District of Camarines Sur. May we now recognize Representative Gabriel H. Bordado Jr. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 3rd District of Camarines Sur is hereby recognized. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Naririnig po ba ako dyan, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, you're loud and clear. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Majority Floor Leader. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat, lalong-lalo na po sa ating sponsor at ang mga opisyales ng Department of Education na pinapamunuan ni Secretary Leonor Briones. Bago po ang lahat, may ipinadala po sa aking letter ang isang grupo. Nakasama po rito si Congresswoman Franz Castro na nagsasabi na we need to follow 7 measures to ensure the delivery of safe, accessible, quality, responsive, and relevant education amid the pandemic. Ang sinasabi nila, Number one, sufficient government funding. Number two, installation of preventive health measures. Number three, putting in place health protection and mechanisms for the teachers, the non-teaching staff, and the students. Number four, provision of laptop, gadget, and internet allowance to teachers and learners. And number five, ensuring adequate printed modules for the student. And then number six, adopting a fairer and more flexible evaluation and grading system. And the last, number seven, incorporation of education on pandemic in the curriculum to assist the students in surviving the crisis. Now, what is the reaction of our honorable sponsor to these proposals? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, kumusta pala Kong Gabi? The Department of Education is complying with the minimum health standard. No? They're following the minimum health standards, and they also have support from the local government units in terms of complying, no? With the sabihin ba natin yung kakulangan, no, ng Department of Education budget. Earlier, si Kong Franz Castro also proposed additional funding in order to accomplish, no, or clip lahat na sinasabi nyo with regards to the implementation of not only health standards, but also to effectively implement the Department of Education mandate. So dito sa sinasabi natin na pandemya, the inclusion of pandemic topic in the curriculum is found also in the health, science, edukasyon ng pangpapakatao sa curriculum po.
So in other words, Mr. Speaker, Madam Josie, you believe that the seven measures are doable or viable?
Mr. Speaker, all the suggestions of our good Congressman, Gabi, are viable. But the problem, of course, is the insufficiency of funds. No? But nonetheless, the department has made some guidelines or measures, such as alternative work arrangements. Under their department order, they provide a menu of options and guidance to the department offices, schools, community learning centers, and personnel on the work arrangement that is most applicable to their area, no? In supporting the what we call the basic education learning continuity program, based on, number one, form of community quarantine where the office school is located, minimum public health and safety standards set by the IATF. This is, of course, together with DepEd and DOH. Continuity of basic education services amidst the pandemic, the nature of services to be delivered by personnel, age group and health conditions of personnel, and travel and interzonal limitations, and the impositions of other policies or IATF health protocols of the LGUs. So yun po, tapos syempre yung safe return to work, no? Yung mga disinfection, decontamination of buildings, facilities, ito kasama na ito, regular health status checkup for the employees, modification of the workplace layout in accordance with the stringent physical distancing. We also have the restriction of office-related mass gathering and minimizing face-to-face interaction through remote and online platforms, and the implementation of health and psychosocial support interventions. And other provisions adjusted the process of, ito, may mga ibang ano naman sila. Iba-ibang transportation arrangement for the skeletal force during ECQ, MECQ, and GCQ.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor. We both agree with the measures, and I do hope that this can be implemented in all schools of the country. Now, with classes having barely started, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, we are already seeing a number of errors in the self-learning modules. Sinabi na yan kanina ni Congresswoman Castro. According to Education Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, may kababayan and idol, Diosdado Dad San Antonio, the department will be issuing a set of errata and reminding teachers to properly explain the correction to students. However, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, would this be adequate enough, considering that students would be reliant on the modules and the teacher supervision might prove to be challenging at times? Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, we do note that there are images circulating online showing the problematic modules. But the department has already launched, they call hashtag Error Watch. It's a report and feedback mechanism to help address the erroneous modules that is circulating online. And the department also will come up with a public education mechanism on learning resources, which aims to promote information on how to spot, validate, qualify, and address error on the different level of governance.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, is the department planning to recall and reprint modules, seeing that the distant learning setup might be in place longer than we anticipated? Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, there will be no recall, but teachers will communicate errata with the learners. And we are reducing reliance on modules in the future because we know that they are expensive as well and harmful to the environment. Pero sa ngayon, that's the pinaka-practical, sabihin natin, and most conservative approach that the Department of Education sees fit at the moment.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, in all honesty, did the department have adequate time to prepare the modules and other learning materials for this new setup? Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, may I request the good sponsor to please repeat his questions?
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, in all honesty, did the department have adequate time to prepare the modules and other learning materials for this new setup?
Honestly, Mr. Sponsor, biglaan ito, no? Especially with the COVID pandemic.
How long, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, did the preparation for learning materials take? And what was the department's process in ensuring the quality of these materials? Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, kindly give me a minute to reconcile our records and get the response from the department. May I request for a minute suspension po?
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker,
Session resumed.
with regards to SLM production, there were guidelines in the development and quality assurance that were followed. There are 8 steps. Would you like me to read all the 8 steps, Kong Gabi?
Anyway, Madam Sponsor, Mr. Speaker, you are telling us that the department has all this set of measures to ensure the quality of the modules?
Yes po, Mr. Speaker.
But despite the existence of such measures, errors still crop up.
Mr. Speaker, totoo na may mga quality assurance na being implemented by the department. However, not all modules, na yung sinasabi natin that are nakakalat online na may errors are prepared by the Department of Education. It could be coming from the private sectors na hindi naman under control lahat, Department of Education proper.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, there was this article in a national newspaper stating that officials of the DepEd were also in the process of procuring assistance from experts that would serve as additional ears, eyes, and hands in boosting their efforts to thoroughly review SLMs and other content. Now, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, shouldn't the creators of these contents be experts in their fields in the first place to be allowed to prepare the modules and other learning materials in order to avoid basic errors? Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, for the DepEd TV, we are getting 60 Q&A experts to assist in making sure that there are no errors. And for the SLM, we're also in the process of engaging third-party experts to assist the Department of Education.
So, in other words, Mr. Speaker, Madam Chairman, Madam Sponsor, the officials who crafted the SLMs cannot be considered as experts.
Mr. Speaker, considering that you're looking at more than 100,000 modules, pages that are being printed out, yung sinasabi natin na 34 as of the latest count error is quite immaterial or insignificant. And out of the 34, 15 is not coming from the DepEd.
Anyway, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, I do hope that with the hiring of this additional experts, with the hiring of these people who can really check the modules, I really hope that we will avoid embarrassing errors in the learning materials that we will be giving to our students. Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, we will do our best. The department, of course, wouldn't want to have errors, as you said, embarrassing. Kahit na isang error lang, syempre, binabatikos na sila. But rest assured, there's the error watch that it's being set up by the department that will correct future errors.
Mr. Speaker, Madam
minimize.
Sponsor, with the heightened need to focus on education in 2021, why is it that the Department of Education decided to impose drastic budget cuts on its other attached agencies? Won't these agencies like the National Book Development Board and the National Council for Children's Television and their programs be vital in supporting the country in shifting to different modes of learning?
Sige po.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that should be addressed not by the Department of Education because it is not in their mandate to make those cuts. It is the DBM po, the Department of Budget and Management, who decides and make the cuts, who made those cuts.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, we have to remind whoever did the cuts that this can be disastrous to the scheme of things in the Department of Education. So if the DBM did it, then we must do everything to remind the DBM not to do such drastic cuts in the budgets of other agencies which are helping the Department of Education. Mr. Speaker, Madam Chairman, or Madam Sponsor.
I fully agree with you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, and thank you very much to the officials of the DepEd led by Secretary Leonor Briones.
Salamat din po.
I fully support the increase in the budget of the Department of Education.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen from the 3rd District of Camarines Sur. The Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next to interpolate the sponsor, may we now recognize the representative from the 3rd District of Nueva Ecija, Honorable Rosana Ria V. Vergara.
The lady from the 3rd District of Nueva Ecija is hereby recognized.
Mr. Speaker, can you hear me?
Loud and
Mr.
clear.
Thank you, sir.
Proceed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, honorable sponsor, and to all our colleagues in the Zoom and on the floor, and to the DepEd family. Simple lang po ang aking tanong. Taon-taon po tinatanong ko kung paano po ba nag-allocate ng mga classrooms sa bawat distrito. At taon-taon, sinasagot po ko na it's on a needs-based basis. And there's also a site inspection and technical assessment. At nagtataka po ako, Ginoong Speaker, na kahit sa DepEd budget, ay malaki po ang kakulangan ng aking distrito. Subalit, taon-taon, imbes na tumaas ang aking allocation, ito ay mas lumiliit habang yung ibang lugar sa aking probinsya ay hamak sa laki. Nakikita po ba ito ng DepEd at tinitignan po ba nila ito? Para hindi ko po hinahangad na maging kasing laki sa ibang distrito sa aking probinsya, pero sana po balanse. Ito po ba ay tinitignan ng DepEd?
Mr. Speaker, the school building allocation, the funds, a number of classrooms are actually based on actual classroom shortage in each area, prorated on available funds, based on the available funds. So every district do not have equal allocations because there is uneven development in every area. Classroom shortage also differ from one district to another. So like for example, Caloocan First District, they have an enrollment of 208,338. And their number of schools, they have 65 sites. Classroom shortage, around 900. So for 2021, they only have a 25 classroom allocation worth around 62 million pesos. Sa Caloocan 2 naman, district, ang enrollment nila is 57,000. The number of school sites, around 23. Ang classroom shortage niya is 187. But for 2021, yung classroom niya na allocated is only 5 classroom, which is 13 million. So, yung sinasabi natin is iba-iba talaga yun, no? Yung district na allocation. So, it's not even. So, it's based on total enrollment, inventory of usable facilities, and suitable, sabihin natin biddable, tama ba? Biddable space, no? So total classroom allocation per district is based on the total physical targets, based on available budget, prorated based on total classroom requirement nationwide.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor, my dear friend, Congressman Josie, and Honorable Speaker. Naintindihan ko po lahat yon. Subalit, tama po ba na sa aking probinsya, for instance, may isang taon, may isang distrito, higit 1 billion. Tapos yung distrito mo is 100 million. Samantalang sa DepEd, ayon sa DepEd datos mismo, ay pareho kayong may kakulangan at halos pantay ang kakulangan. So bakit po ganun kalaki ang discrepancy? Naintindihan ko po that, you can't have equal budgets because different needs, different districts. But sa isang probinsya na lang po, ba't ganun nagkakaroon ng napakalaking discrepancy? 1 billion versus 100 million. Tama po ba yun?
Mr. Speaker, Madam colleague, it's siguro hindi, according to the department, baka hindi galing sa kanila yung budget na yun because they only have 10 billion for 2020 and they cannot allocate 1 billion just for one district, considering that their funds is also very limited for the basic education facilities program. Unless it's coming from different department funds po.
Honorable Speaker, Madam Sponsor, I wasn't referring to this year's budget. Sinabi ko po na halos taon-taon buhat po ako'y naging kongresista noong 2016. Ito ay isang tinitignan ko na. And I'm referring to a budget of a previous year. Pero ang panawagan ko na po, because I don't want to take too much time, is sana po tignan po nila, hindi lang ang aking probinsya, kundi kung paano yung allocation. Dahil meron mga nagsasabi na para lumaki daw ang budget mo sa DepEd, kailangan maglabas ka ng pondo. Sa loob-loob ko, that's corrupt. And I want to make sure that the DepEd, if this is happening, dapat they're aware that there's someone else controlling their funds, that there's a syndicate that is operating below the secretary's beneath the secretary's power. Yun lang po ang aking hiling na tignan nila kung paano yung allocation at kung meron ba talagang sindikatong nag-ooperate. At in reference po to that 1 billion, lahat po yan ay galing sa DepEd. I can furnish the honorable sponsor po details of that budget when it was approved and passed. That's all, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Madam Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will look into that. The Department of Education assures Congresswoman Rhea Vergara that they will look into it. And if it's also possible, if you can help us expedite by giving the department a record of where those schools you claim that had bigger budget, where they are located po. Salamat.
Thank you, Honorable Sponsor. Yes, I will do that, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Lady from 3rd District of Nueva Ecija, the Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next to interpret the sponsor, I move that we recognize Representative Sergio Dagook of the APEC party list. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
The distinguished gentleman from APEC party list is hereby recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Speaker, kagalang-galang na sponsor, at magandang hapon po sa ating lahat, kasama yung nasa Zoom, at gayon din po sa ating pamilya ng Department of Education sa pamumuno ni Secretary Leonor Briones. Dalawang punto lang po ang katanungan ko, but before I proceed with some clarificatory questions, would the distinguished sponsor allow this representation to ask some clarificatory question?
Mr. Speaker, I'd gladly answer the questions of Congressman Dagook of the APEC party list.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor, Mr. Speaker. Before the first question, I would like to manifest first my full support to the budget of the Department of Education, because education is nearest to my heart. My wife, my spouse is a teacher. So I really support the budget, and if possible, madagdagan pa siya. The first issue that I wanted to raise, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, is that is there really a study of the Department of Education with regards to the issues being raised just this morning by Representative Mark Go of Baguio City? Ang tinutukoy ko po, may seryoso po ba kayong pag-aaral at cost-benefit analysis considering the following parameters: constructing additional classrooms and maintaining it, vis-a-vis utilizing the private schools offering the same courses in the area, instead of adding construction of classrooms annually. Linawin ko lang po, alam ko po na hindi lahat ng lugar sa ating bayan ay mayroong nag-ooperate na private schools. So I think may inventory naman yung ating kagawaran kung anong mga lugar yung walang private schools at ano yung mga lugar na mayroon. So may pag-aaral po ba tayong ginawa using cost-benefit analysis kung alin at saan tayo makakatipid?
Mr. Speaker, with regards to the question of Congressman Dagook, actually, currently, we already have that program. No? It's a collaboration between the public and the private sector, private schools, with regards to the answering the lack of classroom problem. In fact, through the GASPE program, yung tawag nila government assistance to students and teachers in private education, yun ang ginagamit ng Department of Education to assist the private schools to accommodate the overflow from the public schools. This is to address the number of classrooms, limited classrooms from in the public sector. So, yun ang ano natin dito, yung GASPE. It's an ongoing program po. Until now, it's being implemented. Tsaka may budget siya for the 2021, under the 2021 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor. With all due respect, alam ko po yung program na yon. Ang tinutukoy ko po ay hindi lang programa ang gagawin. Kung hindi, direksyon, no? Pananaw sa hinaharap kung saan tayo. Patuloy ba tayong magko-construct ng mga classrooms kahit nagsiksika na, naghahanap na tayo ng mga area na malalagyan ng classrooms, nag-hire tayo ng non-teaching staff personnel, non-teaching personnel to maintain that. Whereas doon sa private, existing na, dalawang ibon pa ang tinatamaan natin kasi tinutulungan nating mabuhay din sila. Those are some of the parameters. Ang tinutukoy ko po, hindi lang program, kung hindi direksyon na kung sakali, mas makatipid tayo. Pareho lang naman ang layunin natin, mapag-aral, may mapasukan yung next generation ng mga kabataan. Mayroon bang pag-aaral na ginagawa, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, mayroon tayong gano'n no, sa Department of Education, and it's called the Private Education Assistance Committee. And this PIAC considers the study of the cost analysis or cost-benefit analysis of using private school assets instead of building more public school classrooms. And this PIAC is part of a research, as part of the research agenda, since this will affect also the NCR in particular, no? Lalo na dito sa NCR natin. And that is being done. The private schools are offering their facilities for use of public schools.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor. And I am respectfully requesting DepEd, if you have that kind of study with recommendations, if possible, you can submit a copy of that to Congress so that in the next budget year, we can evaluate kung magkano ba yung para doon sa additional classrooms. Of course, kindly provide us with the inventory kung anong mga lugar yung walang private schools na nag-operate at ano yung mga lugar na mayroon. So that my office, no, personally, will really seriously look at that. Kasi tinatay up ko yan doon sa problema natin sa droga, wherein there are some recommendations na magtayo tayo ng mga rehabilitation facilities all over the country. Lahat ng region, lahat ng probinsya. Pero kung titingnan mo, there are existing rehabilitation centers na magamit ka agad at mura pa yung babayaran ng gobyerno per head instead of maintaining facilities, allocating billions of pesos to construct the buildings, no, the physical facilities and equipment. So, yun po ang tinitingnan namin. Tinitingnan ng kinatawang ito, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor. Anyway, I would like to reiterate, may I respectfully request for a copy of that study with some recommendations. Saang lugar, no, kung mayroon na yan, saang lugar yung pupwede yan, mas makatipid tayo. Doon sa last, no, and final issue, I would like to ask Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, the DepEd, mayroon ba kayong standing policy na hindi nyo pwedeng i-postpone yung isang activity, school activity, kung walang executive order yung local government unit on that particular area? Mayroon bang existing policy na ganyan, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, tungkol doon sa first nyo question, ay yung statement nyo, no, regarding the cost of benefit analysis, yung point nyo po is well taken. And then we will pursue this research agenda with the PEAC Research Committee to be undertaken by, of course, the higher education institutions. Eh, yung tungkol doon sa pangalawang request nyo, question nyo, if there's any guidelines or policy, mayroon po. Executive order on suspension of classes po.
That's why, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, I am asking that because I think that's the other way. Sumulat na ako sa Department of Education. Kasi dito sa lugar namin, there is already an executive order of the province na suspending all trips, no, from the island to the mainland. Wala na pong pinapabiyahe ng mga vessel dahil mayroon pong masasabi natin na local transmission. I have already coordinated with the regional director, no? But the division superintendent in our area is still proceed with the activity of distribution of learning materials in the schools. Hindi na nga pinadistribute yung mga teachers doon sa mga bahay-bahay, pero yung mga parents ay pinapapunta pa rin sa eskwelahan. I am a representative, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, of the Association of Philippine Electric Cooperatives. My constituents are the member consumer owners of electric service utilities. So they are also teachers and most of them are parents. That's why dinudulog ko po sa regional director. So may I ask, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, may ginawa po ba ang regional director ng Caraga Region doon sa division superintendent na he was through with the distribution of modules in the school, requiring the parents to come to school to claim their modules?
Mr. Speaker, itong COVID-19, sa totoo lang, is really a challenge and a problem, no? And in meeting this challenge, we're compelled to transform for the better. At saka yung health and safety is the main primordial, sabihin natin, primordial concern of the department. Of course, without compromising yung learning continuity. And yung sinasabi niyo po, totoo, there's a policy DepEd only follows the protocols or the executive order issued by the IATF, the Interagency Task Force, at saka yung mga LGUs. Kaya pag sinabi nila na magkakaroon sila ng ECQ or MECQ or community, then DepEd has to follow. So wala silang magawa, otherwise they will be punished or probably impose sanctions on the department. No? Tapos yung sinasabi nyo na about the parents claiming the modules for their children, that has been arranged, and yung parents naman, I think they all agree Pag hindi makapunta yung parents, then dinadala din sa bahay nila. Pag safe na yung area.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, no? Ibig bang sabihin sa sagot ng Department of Education through the distinguished sponsor, may pahintulot sila sa division ng Siargao na ituloy yung pamamahagi sa eskwelahan. Yung regional director may pahintulot na ituloy yung pamamahagi ng module sa eskwelahan.
Mr. Speaker, the department would just follow kung anong existing protocol.
Ibig sabihin na Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, hindi nasagot directly yung tanong ko with all due respect. May pahintulot sila nung araw na yon na ituloy.
Mr. Speaker, specifically kasi sinasabi nyo sa Siargao. So hindi ko po alam kung anong protocol doon sa but it all depends on the IITF risk assessment, no? So siguro we can also validate yung sinasabi nyo, no? Doon sa regional director to work closely with the IATF in Siargao.
That's the last point, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, that I'm going to raise. Kasi this representation would like to respectfully but seriously ask the Department of Education, particularly Caraga Regional Director, to submit to the office of this representation lahat po ng mga instructions, memo o sulat, communications relative to that issue. Kasi kung tatanungin mo si Regional Director, sabi pinahinto na. Pero pagdating dito, tuloy pa rin. Mayroon po akong pamangkin na nakatira sa bahay ko. Isa po doon sa mga nila ay medyo suspect. Kaya hindi ko na po pinapunta. That's why I'm very serious about what I have requested or coordinated to the regional director. Hindi po magkakatugma. That's why I am humbly requesting what particular action that the regional director of Caraga have taken into with regards to the issue that I am concerned that I have raised to his office before I wrote the Department of Education. Kasi sumulat na po ako dahil parang hindi po magkatugma yung sabi ni RD at yung mga nangyayari dito. I do not take much of your time. Alam ko marami pa pong mag-interpret. Yun lang po, kindly submit to this office. Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker. Kagalang-galang na sponsor sa pagbigay niyo ng pagkakataon na makapagtanong ng ilang mga katanungan.
Mr.
Thank
Speaker,
you. Good afternoon once again.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, noted po yung sinasabi ni Kong Dagook and rest assured, lahat na sinasabi niya, yung mga request niya, will be complied and submitted to his office.
Maraming salamat po sa inyo, Representative Dagi ng Association of Philippine Electric Cooperatives sa Party List. Sadyang napaka-importante po talaga itong budget ng ating Republika. At dahil dito, nararamdaman namin na sa inyo, Representative Dagi, sobra kayong interesado na pati ang inyong aso at inyong manok ay nakikinig at nakikidiskusyon. the Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize Representative Rodante Marcoleta of Sagip Party List for his interpellation. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Maraming salamat po, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, I will be very, very quick in my interpellation, but that will be dependent on the honesty of the Department of Education. I mean, their honesty in answering simple questions. After all, Mr. Speaker, I still believe that honesty is still the best policy. Mr. Speaker, because of the public health emergency brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, Department of Education adopted what it called the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, BELCP. That is correct, Madam Sponsor. Is that not so?
Mr. Speaker, may I know what the question is, DS, Marcoleta?
Was the answer yes?
Yes to an honest answer? Yes.
And based on DepEd's own admission, Mr. Speaker, it made several adjustments in order to deliver distance learning at a magnitude never done before. Did I quote the statement correctly, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? Baka po tayo magtatagal kasi napakasimple po ng tanong ko.
Sure.
Kayo po ang may kasalanan kung tatagal po tayo.
Mr. Speaker, siguro sa kasimpleng tanong, hindi ko na.
Ano po?
Can you please repeat it po, DS?
Huwag po
yung
kayong
tanong?
ninenervyos, madam. Ako naman po ay, alam naman ninyong napakabait din naman. At kayo rin naman po ay magkaibigan po tayo, hindi po ba?
Yes, can you please repeat your question po?
Tagalogin ko na lamang po. Ang sabi po kasi ng DepEd, dahil nga po sa COVID pandemic, kinakailangan pong mag-adjust tayo. At sabi nila, itong ginawa nilang ito is in order to deliver distance learning at a magnitude never done before.
Tama
Did I
po.
quote the statement correctly, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The most controversial delivery mode in this adjusted learning distance system, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, is the self-learning modules or SLMs. Tama po.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's according to the interpolator's perception, no? Or
You mean they are not controversial, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? This has been the byword in the school communities all over the Philippines because they were not delivered in the manner that or in the magnitude that was never done before. It was very prophetic, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. O sige, ganito na lamang po. How many modules was actually needed by DepEd for the first quarter? Per grade level and per quarter? I will accept an answer, I do not know, sir. I do not know, Your Honor, if that is the case. Para madali lang po tayo. Ayoko po nang magtagal tayo rito. I committed myself to a very, very short interpellation.
Mr. Speaker, our sponsor, it's 1.1 billion modules nationwide.
Hindi ko po masyadong marinig po kayo, Madam Sponsor. I'm not sure if your microphone is okay, but do you hear me loud and clear?
Yes po.
How
Well,
many
the answer
modules?
is 1.1 billion modules, number of modules. This is only for the first quarter po.
1.1 million modules.
Billion po, billion.
Yes po, 1.1 million modules.
1.1 billion modules for the
Billion
first
modules.
quarter.
Okay. Paano po nangyari yon, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? Ang huling alam ko po, ang huling tala ng DepEd, there are 22.5 million enrollees for this school year. Nakita ko pa nga po kanina sa presentation, 24.8 million na po pala. So but let's stick with the 22.5 million enrollees. Kung 1.1 billion modules, paano po mangyayari yun? Ilan po ba hindi po ba meron tayong 5,689 competencies na kinompress ninyo?
Tama po, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Tulungan ko po tayo, magkwentahan tayo ng tama. 5,689 competencies, i-divide na lang natin sa 4 because there are 4 quarters. Ang ibig sabihin po nito, you will need at least 1,200 to 1,300 modules. Simpleng arithmetic lamang po ito.
Mr. Speaker, hindi lang naman modules kasi there's several competencies that we have to consider in one module. So like for example, ang computation natin, paano natin nakuha yung 1.1 billion modules is the number of students times 8 subjects times 8 weeks po. 8 weeks per quarter.
Hindi po para madali tayo, hindi ko po kasi pwedeng tanggapin kagad na sinabi niyo 1.1 billion. Let us test kung talagang yun lang po ang kakailangan ninyo. Sapagkat ipinangako ninyo na bawasan yung competencies from 14,000 competencies, kinompress po ninyo yon or you streamline it to only 5,689. Ito po yung tinatawag ninyong most essential learning competencies. Kaya po pag i-divide natin sa 4 yan, hindi naman po pwedeng hindi natin aralin yan. Kinompress na nga ninyo You reduce at least 40% of the total previous competencies. Ginawa na nga ninyong 40% lang So sa inyong mga pagsasalita po sa TV, sa radio, ilang beses po, maski sa pagharap nyo sa Senado, sinabi nga po ninyo, 1,300 ang average po ng mga modules na kailangan ninyo. Magsimula po tayo doon sa sinasabi ninyo sa TV, maski po sa nakarang hearing natin sa Senate, sinabi ninyo, 1,300 is the average modules sa quarter na ito. Ngayon, tatalikuran nyo po ba yun o pananagutan nyo na ngayon? Kasi po, ang susunod kong tanong, sa 1,300 modules for the first quarter, i-divide lang po natin yan sa 13. Bakit po 13? There are 13 levels, grade levels, K to 12. Ano pong ang mangyayari yan? 1,300 modules divided by 13. Lalabas po dyan about 100 modules per grade level per learner. Hindi po ba ganun lang kasimple, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? Pagkatapos po, kung may 8 subjects, kasi 8 po yung subjects at least, That will be 100 divided by 8. Magkakaroon po tayo ng 12 modules per subject. Is that not correct? So, arithmetic lang po ito eh.
Mr. Speaker, can you give us time to look at the records? Because medyo technical yung hinihingi ni...
Hindi po, 100 divided by 8, 12 modules po ang mangyayari per subject.
Kasi po, Mr. Speaker, some competencies can be clustered into one module. Kaya hindi talaga yung sinasabi natin na 1:1. Kaya they're looking at the records kasi nga iba-iba yung module per subject.
Ay, mawawala po tayo kapag ganoon po yung argumento. Tinutulungan ko na lang po kayo para kwentahin natin eh. Paano po natin makukwenta talaga yung number of modules na kakailanganin natin kung ito pong simpleng arithmetic na pinipresent sa inyo ay pare-pareho po nating tinatanggihan.
Mr. Speaker, from the assumptions or parameter used in making the modules per level, depende siya sa level from kinder to grade 12. So like for example, yung kinder, ang kailangan niya na module per learner is only 66. Yung grade 1 naman, naging 300. Tapos pagbaba hanggang 11, yung grade 11, example, maging 546 modules. So iba-ibang level, iba-ibang modules, number of modules din. So that's how they compute it.
Para madali na lang po, ilang modules po ba ang kakailanganin ng isang learner sa
Mr. Speaker, it's by grade level po.
Average po, kasi meron tayong K to 12. I-average lang po natin kasi gusto ko pong madaliin lang ang kwenta. Pag in-average po natin from K to 12, lalabas po anong average na number na modules per enrollee.
Hindi natin masasabi average. Can I just quickly read the modules per level?
30.
No. Like for example, Mr. Speaker, sa kinder, 66, grade 1, 300, grade 2, 293, grade 3, 357, grade 4, 461, grade 5, 430, grade 6, 359, grade 7, 532, grade 8, 550, grade 9, 377, grade 10, 390, grade 11, 546, and grade 12, 41. So yun po yung combination, no? A number of modules per learner.
Bakit po nagkakahirap tayo na sabihin natin, kunin natin yung average lang para makwenta lang po talaga natin kung ilan talaga ang modules na dapat i-produce ng DepEd. Ang average po kasi from kinder to 12, ang inihingi ko lang. Kasi po, 8 po yung subjects, tama po? 8 po yung subjects ng isang bata. I-average po ninyo, ilang modules po ngayon per subject. Kaya para makita po natin ang average, kumuha tayo ng average ng kinder hanggang sa 12 para mapalitaw natin, mas o menos, ilan bang kailangan ng module ng isang mag-aaral? Kasi bigla nyo kami binigyan ng 1.1 billion. Anong basis nito? Ibig bang sabihin nito, mga titles lang ito? There are 8 subjects. Ilang modules?
Average po, Mr. Speaker, ng 1,286 per quarter.
1,000?
286 modules per quarter po.
Kapag binultiply po natin ang 1,286 per student per quarter, i-multiply po natin yan ng 24.8 million enrollees. Ilan po ang makukwenta natin na number of modules?
Mr. Speaker, yung sinasabi natin, because of the competencies, no, tsaka iba-iba yung grade level, sa totoo lang, in all honesty, hindi talaga yun, that's not how the department, we cannot really average it to that. Kaya,
Kayo po, ba't bumalik na naman tayo doon?
well,
Naibigay nyo na po sa akin ang average na 1,286 per student per quarter. Ang sinasabi ko lamang po, usapan natin, i-multiply natin sa 24.8 million enrollees, ilan po ang makukwenta natin?
So, Mr. Speaker, we take back that yung sinasabi natin na simple division lang, no, of the kasi talagang iba yung competition. Oh, sorry. It's average from kinder to grade 12, yung 1,286 modules. So, yun po yung hindi each student, hindi per student.
Ano po? Nakakatuwa naman po yung sagot ninyo. Kanina po, sinabi nyo sa akin, ang average per student, 1,280. 24.8 million po. Ilan ba talaga? Kaya nga nagkakaganito po tayo. Magmula po sa budget briefing, wala na pong makasagot sa atin. Ilan ba talagang kailangan nyo? Ilan ba ipuproduce ng central? Ilan ba ipuproduce ng region at division at saka mga eskwela? Nagkakagulo po kayo. So sa binigay po nyo sa akin datos, 31 billion po ang kakailanganin na. Pagkatapos bibigyan nyo kami ng 1.14 billion, mali po kayo rito. Ano po ba talagang totoo? Kaya kanina po, Mr. Speaker, sinabi ko na, maaari akong magtagal, maaari akong konti lang. Depende po sa honesty ng sagot nyo eh. Simple arithmetic po ang pinag-uusapan natin.
Mr. Speaker, may I request for a minute suspension to get the record straight?
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker,
Session resumed.
yes, PS Marcoleta, ito na yung galing sa actuarian. Ha? So, may I explain? Once again, there are 8 modules times 8 subjects. That's equivalent to 8 times 8, 64 modules per quarter. Times 4 quarters, so ang average niyan is 256 modules per learner per year, no? On the average. So 256 modules per average times 22.5 learners, 22.5 million learners. So that's 5,760,000,000 per year modules that they have to produce. And per quarter, if you divide that by 4, that means to say they need to produce 1,440,000,000 as an average. Pero yung sa ngayon, ang nasa nila, computation is they're only averaging 1.1 billion per quarter.
Nakalilito po ang sagot ninyo.
Yes, bibigyan na lang kita ng DS, so you can continue asking your next question. Kasi syempre, pareho tayo. Baka mahina tayo sa math.
Ganito po kasi, isang competency, isang module, hindi po ba?
Not necessarily, kasi yung sinasabi
What do you mean not necessarily?
Some competencies can be clustered.
One competency is one module.
Ideal yan, pero may mga competencies that can be clustered in one module po.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, may I repeat? From 14,000 competencies, kinompress na po natin yan. Inalis po nila in 60%, naging 40% na lang, kaya naging 5,689. Kailangan po lahat ng 5,689 competencies na yan, aralin po ng Kung hindi, wala nang matututunan ng bata. Kinompress na nga natin, these are the most essential competencies. Kaya po, kapag dinivide natin sa 4 na quarters yan, lilitaw mga 1,400. Kaya nga sinasabi ko po sa inyo, sa marami pong beses na pakikipanayam ninyo sa TV, sa radyo, ang pinipilit po ng DepEd, 1,300 po ang mga modules for competencies. Kaya nga po, tinatanong ko kanina, kung 1,300 ang competencies, yun din po yung modules. Kaya nakakapagtaka kung paano kayo kukwenta ng 1.1 billion lamang. Malabo po ang kwenta ninyo. Kaya po pala hanggang ngayon hindi natin malaman kung ano talaga ang kailangan ninyo at kung paano ninyo ipoproduce. At ang nangyari pa nga po, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, ang mga teachers po ang ginamit para mag-produce ng module. O sige, granting for the sake of an argument na totoo po yung 1.1 billion modules. Hindi po ba totoo ang gumawa ay kanya-kanyang modules, mga division, mga teachers? Gumamit po sila ng photocopying machine, ng risograph, kinulate po ng teachers, in-staple, pagkatapos, pinamahagi sa mga bata. Ito po ba'y gawain ng guro, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? Di po ba kawawang-kawawa ang mga guro sa ginawa ninyong ito?
Mr. Speaker, the modules are being prepared and developed by the master teachers and the supervisors. So yung mga teachers naman, nag-a-assist lang sila.
Hindi ko po talaga marinig yung sagot ninyo. Pasensya na po, hindi po malinaw.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, yung mga modules po are designed and prepared and developed by the master teachers and supervisors. Tapos yung mga teachers, they're just assisting in the production po.
Hindi po ganun ang nangyari. Yun nga po sinasabi ko sa inyo,
Yes.
dapat magpakatapat na lang ang DepEd. Sapagkat ako po, monthly, kung minsan weekly na po nang nangyari, tinitingnan ko po yung constituents sa Central Luzon. Halos lahat po ng mga teachers, iisa po ang kanilang iniiyak. Hirap na hirap sila, nangalap sila ng papel, at kami po tumulong na rin, pati LGUs, nagsibili na rin ng photocopying machine. Sila na po ang gumawa. At bakit po pinipilit nila na akala mo merong plano, akala mo organize ang pagkakagawa? Pwede ko bang ipakita sa inyo mga modules?
Yung mga modules po, Mr. Speaker, minsan localize siya, no? Contextualization, yung localization na sinasabi.
Ito po
yung mga flexibility.
Sa Speaker, Your Honor, hindi po pare-pareho. Meron pong maliit, ito pong naka-stapler, iba-iba pong ano. Ito po ba? Magtatagal ito, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? Ilang araw o ilang buwan kaya bago masira itong naka-stapler ng mga modules na ito? Kawawa, bakit hindi po nyo ginawang libro ito? Kahit na po pagsama-samahin natin ito, libro din ito eh. Ang naging problema po ng DepEd, matagal ko na po silang gustong tulungan dito sa isyong ito. Ayaw po nilang makinig, Mr. Speaker. Tingnan po niyo yung mga modules, kung hindi kayo maaawa rito. Naka-stapler lahat. Humingi po ako sa probinsya ng mga modules para makita lang ninyo. Para makita po natin kung sino ang nagsasabi ng totoo o hindi. Ito po ba yung sinabi niyong organize? Hindi po. Kaya po kanina kinukwenta ko sana, Sir Speaker, Your Honor, para maipakita ko sa inyo kung gaano, kung ilang pages ang kakailanganin. Kakailanganin po natin siguro, kasakin ng maraming mga punong kahoy para maiproduce ninyo ito. Halimbawa po, yung isang quarter lang, kung 3,000 pages per learner po, dahil kinuwenta ko na po ito eh. Sa 100 modules per average na po, per learner, per grade level, per quarter, at i-multiply mo po ng 30 pages, average page po ng bawat module, lilitaw po ay 3,000 pages po lahat per learner ang kanyang babasahin. Kaya kapag ka po yung 3,000 pages na yon ay minultiply mo again sa 22.5 million, ang makukuha po nyo dyan ay 67.5 billion pages. Saan po ninyo kukunan na punong kahoy yun? Ganun po kabigat itong pangyayaring ito. At kung tatanungin namin kayo, yung po bang 10 billion na yon na dinownload nyo sa mga regions at saka sa mga eskwela, sapat po ba yon? First quarter lang ang pinag-uusapan natin eh. Sa photocopying lamang po sa 50 centimos, aabot pa rin ng more than 30 billion ang gagastahin ninyo. So ganito na naman po ang gagawin nyo sa second quarter. Saan kayo kukuha ng pera? First quarter lang po ang pinag-uusapan natin. By next year, you are asking a budget of 15.2 billion pesos. Ito na naman po ang gagawin ninyo, modules. Ba't hindi na lang po kayo bumalik sa libro? Over the years, Mr. Speaker, ang budget sa libro wala pang 1 billion. Yun po ang masinop na paraan ng pag-aaral. Ibalik po ninyo yung libro. Ang problema po kasi ninyo, kaya hindi nyo maibalik ang libro, dahil 2 years ago, I've already advised you na makipag-usap kayo sa private sector publishers. Sila ang tutulong sa inyo sa paggawa ng libro o modules kung yun ang gusto ninyo. Pero Mr. Speaker, very lately, yung private school publisher sumulat sa akin, nakiusap sa DepEd, nasa akin po yung mga sulat nila, binigyan nila ako ng kopya, sumulat sa secretary ng DepEd kung paano sila makakatulong sa paggawa ng modules because they're prepared, they're willing, and this is their business to help. Hindi po sila sinagot ng DepEd. Sumulat sila sa NBDB, National Book Development Board. Tinangkarin nilang makipag-usap, paano ba ang gusto ninyo, ibigay nyo kami ng guideline, paano kami makakatulong sa inyo. Hindi rin po sila sinagot, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. Anong klaseng pamamaraan po ang gusto ninyo talagang gawin? Ayaw ninyong involve ang private sector publishers, pero sila po ang sinabi ng batas natin, Republic Act 8047, 25 years ago. na sila ang bigyan ninyo ng pagkakataong tumulong sa publishing industry ng ating bansa. Ano po ang ginawa ng DepEd over the last 25 years? Wala po. Ano pong may pagmamalaki ng National Book Development Board kung ang pag-uusapan is the development of the publishing industry in this country? Tinangka ko pong tumulong sa inyo at ito'y recorded po. 2 years ago or 1 year ago, apat na request ang pinakiusap ko, mag-adjust ang DepEd. Ano po yung isa? Sabi ko, ibalik ninyo ang mga private publishers. Katulungin ninyo sila because sangayon sa batas, sila dapat ang magpundar ng mga kakailanganing libro at mga learning materials. Hindi po sila nakinig kahit na meron ng batas na gano'n, Mr. Speaker. Ang sabi po nila, nangako sila ng National Book Development Board, ibalik na sa opisina ng Presidente sapagkat yun po ang nasa batas. 1 year ago, nangako po sa akin, 2 USEC ang kausap ko. Nagagawa sila kaagad ng paraan na maibalik ang National Book Development Board. Nagsumpa po kami about 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Kapag-alaman ko po, ni isang sulat wala silang nagawa para i-communicate ito sa Office of the President. Sabi ko pa po sa kanila, yung Volume 5 na ginamit nila na procurement modality, sabi ko, wala sa batas yan. Reviewin ninyo. Nangako po sila na gagawin yun, wala rin din po silang ginawa. Nangako rin po sila na tingnan at imbestigahan yung isa sa amin na sumulat sa DepEd na nagpagawa ng libro ng walang bidding, pero wala rin po silang ginawa. Sir Speaker, Your Honor, ang kinatawang ito ay hindi laban sa DepEd. Matagal ko na pong sinabi na kung siguro walang public education sa aming lugar, baka hindi po ako nakapag-aral. Gusto ko po silang tulungan, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. Pero napakahirap ng isang tao o isang ahensya na gusto mo na nga tulungan, ayaw naman niyang magpatulong. O sinasabi niya, sige po, ayaw naman niyang kumibo, ayaw naman niyang makipag-cooperate. Ito po ang problema, Mr. Speaker. Bakit po natin lulustayin ang pera sa module? Ito po, sa tingin ko, yung 1 month po, bata ito, walang kasama, walang teacher. Palagay po ba ninyo, babasahin niyo itong napakaraming modules na ito? Na sa tingin ko, 12,000 pages ang babasahin niya. Wala siyang kasama, wala siyang teacher. Gusto kayang basahin ng bata yon, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor? Ito po yung concern. These are the grave concerns. Ngayon, hihingi po kayo ng 15.2 billion next year. Gagamitin pa po ba natin to sa modules? Gusto ko po sana, bago ako matapos, ito na lang ang, ewan ko po kung talagang seryoso po ang DepEd. Ang akin po sanang mungkahi, Sir Speaker, Your Honor, ay itong mga bagay na ito. Number 1, discard and scrap the production, procurement of modules given the huge budgetary outlay required, the unplanned, uncoordinated, and cumbersome means to produce said learning materials. The enrollees and parents' preference for books as more practical and convenient medium of learning should be given more priority. Number 2, starting the next school year, which begins in September 2021, the National Book Development Board shall have been reverted back to the Office of the President following the intent of Republic Act 8047. In this connection, DepEd shall initiate the required formalities to complete this action in the soonest possible time. Number 3, defer the implementation of OUA Memorandum Circular Number 00-0620-0030 in regard to the specification on new computer devices for students and teachers, while the DepEd computerization program, about 1.5 to 5 billion per year, is being reviewed and rationalized with the end in view of integrating the department's procured IT materials in several years in the learning management system developed earlier for e-classrooms. Last, explore and maintain the school ratio instruction to facilitate learning. School heads shall be encouraged to establish FM radio station within the school campus with at least a broadcast radius of 2 kilometers. Nangyari po sa Tarlac ito. Ang isa po niyong USEC pumunta sa Tarlac, nabigla siya. Kayang-kaya palang gawin ng isang classroom na magtayo ng isang FM station. Makipag-coordinate lang kayo sa NTC. Akala po ninyo, hindi po pwede. Pwede pong mangyari ito. Alam po ninyo kung magkano lang ang cost? 10,000 pesos.
Indulgence
Depende.
of the distinguished sponsor and the Honorable Deputy Speaker, I wish to remind you that our time has expired.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
However, the chair would like to give the distinguished Deputy Speaker the chance to wind up. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in winding up, I'd like to ask the DepEd kung ito pong mga suggestions kung ito nagatanggapin ninyo formally, lalong-lalo na po yung, alam po nyo yung radio station, napaka-importante. Alam po nyo kung magkano ang ginastos lang nila? Sa Tarlac, 3 po ang nagawa nila, 10,000 pesos. Ikukumpara sa bilyon-bilyon na gagastahin ninyo sa modules na maglulustay lamang po kayo ng salapi. Salamat po ng marami, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, just to make my last closing remark regarding the comments of the good Congressman Marcoleta. His problem will eventually be resolved because education is moving towards digitalization and other modes of blended learning, and the printed modules that well, as we know, are not really sustainable later on. But right now, textbooks is really designed. The textbooks are really designed for face-to-face interaction, while the SLM is the learning delivery concept that is most viable at this point because it is interactive, self-contained, self-instructional, with learning time frame suggested by the teachers. Currently, NBDSB invited the public publishers to a meeting, and they were the ones who did not attend the said meeting. However, Secretary of Education, Secretary Briones, wrote to the President and to the Executive Secretary regarding the concern of Congressman Marcoleta regarding the issue of the National Development Board. So everything is well taken, Congressman Marcoleta, and just on record, the Executive Secretary is already in receipt of the letter coming from the Department of Education Secretary.
Thank you, distinguished sponsor and the gentleman from Sagip Party List. The Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next to interpolate the sponsor, may we now recognize Representative Sarah Jane Elago of the Kabataan Party List. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from Kabataan Party List is hereby recognized.
Maraming salamat. Magandang hapon, Ginoong Speaker at sa buong DepEd family. Sa lahat, nais nating batiin ang lahat ng mga guro, mga magulang, mga guardians, lahat po ng nagtataguyod ng pagpapatuloy ng pag-aaral sa gitna ng pandemya. Kinakailangan na tiyakin natin na walang maiiwan at lahat ng mga pangangailangan ng mga estudyante ng ating mga kababayan ay natutugunan upang tiyakin na ang mga pinaghihirapan, ang mga pinopondohan at ginugugol natin na pampublikong pondo para sa edukasyon ay nakakarating sa pinakanangangailangan. Kaya, Ginoong Speaker, nais ko pong malaman kung kamusta na ang paggugol ng DepEd ng pondong nilaan ng Bayanihan to Recover as One Act. May 4 na bilyon para sa new normal sa education sector at ganun din may 600 million pesos para sa qualified students at 300 million para sa qualified teachers and non-teaching personnel. Ang 4 billion po ay para sa new normal sa education, samantalang ang 900 million pesos ay paghahatian ng DepEd at ng CHED.
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Sarah, the 4 billion is allocated for digital and alternative learning modalities under the BELCP. And yung sinasabi niyo po na 900 will be subsidies, no? Like subsidies to private schools, and allowances of displaced teaching and non-teaching personnel will be undertaken by the Department of Labor and Employment.
Speaker, ang 600 million pesos naman po ay para sa qualified students. No? Ilan po ang mga beneficiaries nito at kailan ito makakarating?
600 million, Mr. Speaker, 600 million subsidies and allowances of qualified students in public and private schools in all levels. At saka yung 300 naman million subsidies and allowances of displaced teachers and non-teaching, teaching and non-teaching personnel in all schools, in all levels.
Mr. Speaker, I asked about the number of beneficiaries, no? And when will the beneficiaries receive the much-needed financial assistance for gadgets?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education doesn't have the number, no, of beneficiaries, since it is the Department of Labor and Employment that will be implementing this base, of course, subject to certain guidelines or requirements maybe, no? That the Department of Labor and Employment will
Ibig sabihin, Ginoong Speaker,
these are mostly from the private schools po.
all right, 300 million pesos will be utilized by DOLE, for support for displaced teachers and support personnel in private schools. No, but what about the 600 million pesos? Will this also be implemented under DOLE? Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
The bayanihan too, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education with regards to the yung sa 4 billion yun, no, for education, but 3 billion nasa DepEd, tapos 3.1, tapos yung 900 sa Department of Labor and Employment, yung implementation niya.
But Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, there's a specific provision providing for 600 million pesos for qualified students. May guideline na po ba no, kung sino ang makakatanggap nito? Ginoong Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, wala po yung guidelines sa DepEd kasi nasa Department of Labor and Employment po. So it's the Department DOLE who gives out the guideline.
Mr. Speaker, paano po makakapag-identify ang DOLE ng mga qualified students?
In coordination po with CHED at saka TESDA po.
Right, so linawin ko po, no, ang 900 million para sa estudyante, guro at mga kawani, lahat po yan sa ilalim ng DOLE. No? Kaya kung hihingi po tayo dito sa Kongreso ng guidelines, ulat, pagdating sa beneficiaries, kung kailan niya maipapamigay, regional allocation, DOLE ang may hawak po at namumuno, no, sa paggamit ng pondo nito.
Mr. Speaker, tama po. DOLE yung lead agency na mag-i-implement in coordination with CHED at saka TESDA. And yung sinasabi po na there are 860 schools that will not open due to the pandemic, yung effect ng pandemic. So around sa private school, no, around 860 private schools. And yung naapektuhan noon is around 4,000 teachers and roughly 53,000 learners. So baka yun ang pwedeng mag-apply dun sa DOLE in coordination with CHED and TESDA.
Then Mr. Speaker, bilang ang DOLE ay nakikipagtulungan po sa DepEd at CHED, may pamantayan na po bang binigay ang DepEd sa DOLE kung sino po ang bibigyan natin ng financial assistance mula sa Bayanihan 2?
For learners po, DepEd came up with a draft prioritizing the assistance of learners in the elementary schools. Since there is no other program of assistance for the private elementary schools, unlike the secondary, we have at least the GASPE. And a draft will be coordinated with the CHED using UNIFAS, no? At saka yung sa private Education Assistance Committee, since Bayanihan 2 provision states that it will be implemented similar to ESC, the voucher system, given to senior high schools and tertiary education.
Mr. Speaker, paano po hahatiin ang 900 million na total assistance sa pagitan ng basic at ng higher education?
Yung 300 po will be allocated for teachers and faculties from the private schools, displaced teachers, no? And they will have to coordinate. No? It will be implemented together with other subsidies to the private sector under Bayanihan Law 2. No? And again, in coordinate, it will be provided. The lead agency here is the Department of Labor and Employment. Siguro may mga inputs din galing ng DepEd. No? So DepEd is also working with, are discussing no, the implementation of this with the Department of Labor and Employment. Nag-a-assist yung DepEd.
Ginoong Speaker, kailan po ipamimigay, no? O kailan matatapos ang pamimigay ng assistance na ito sa mga nangangailangan?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, dapat po si DOLE kasi siya yung lead agency na mag-i-implement ito. So wala sa mandate ng Department of Education.
Mr. Speaker, hindi ba nababahala ang DepEd na higit isang buwan na simula ng mapasa ang ang Bayanihan 2 Act at magpasa hanggang ngayon, no, wala pang malinaw na report tungkol sa kung paano ba ginugugol ang pondo na sana'y nakatulong na no, dun sa marami pang mga learners na nagkakaroon ngayon ng agam-agam sa kanilang pagpapatuloy ng pag-aaral dahil sa kakulangan. No? Hindi lang nung mismong kailangan sa blended distance learning na internet connectivity, gadget o kaya naman na pantulong sa pag-aaral ng mga modules, kundi yung mismong pang-araw-araw na paglaban, hindi lang sa sakit, no, hindi lang sa COVID-19, kundi paglaban sa gutom at kahirapan.
Mr. Speaker, on the part of the Department of Education, hindi naman sila remiss no, dun sa obligation nila at duties and responsibilities with regards to yung dapat anong gawin nila. So it's really the Department of Labor na dapat nating tanungin kung bakit hanggang ngayon hindi pa nila na-roll out to the distressed or teachers no, from the private schools.
And now, Mr. Speaker, let me proceed up to some queries related to senior high school enrollment. May we be updated, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, on the most recent enrollment statistics in senior high school?
Mr. Speaker, Madam Congresswoman, colleague, can you give us a few seconds to get the necessary documents?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While we're at it, let me also ask for the breakdown, no, based on track of the senior high school enrollment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Immediate suspension po. May I request?
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker,
Session resumed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as of to date, enrollment is still ongoing, so we do not have the exact figure, yung tinatanong ni Congresswoman Sara regarding the track, but as of now, there are already 754,899 senior high school enrolled for school year 2020-2021. This is as of October 15, 2020.
Ginoong Speaker, ilang bahagdan po ito na mas mababa kumpara sa enrollment natin nitong nakaraan na academic year? What I have here is the figure or the statistics from September 2020, and it has gone down to 30%, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Tama, no, Mr. Speaker, mas mataas yung enrollment ngayon sa public school ng senior high as compared to last year.
Ginoong Speaker, kanina pinag-uusapan yung tungkol sa education service contracting bilang isa rin sa pamamaraan para tumulong doon sa ating mga private schools. Ang mga estudyante at mga teachers sa private schools, lalong-lalo na ngayon na maraming humaharap sa threat na mawalan ng trabaho o kaya talagang wala pang katiyakan kung kailan magbubukas ang kanilang mga eskwelahan. Kaya pwede ba nating malaman kung magkano ang nakalaan para sa ESC para sa taong 2021 at magkano ito kumpara sa 2020?
Mr. Speaker, yung sa government assistance and subsidies, for 2021, under the NEP, there's 26.27 billion allocated for gas. And yun dun sa sinasabi nyo na ESC program, there's 1,149,975 slots.
Speaker, sa estimates po ng DepEd, magkano yung kabuang kinakailangan nila, ang kabuuan po nilang naging proposal para matulungan ang 856 schools na nagsabi na ng kanilang intent to temporarily shut down their operations for the current academic year?
Mr. Speaker, DepEd proposal for 2021 for the GAS is 49.54 billion, or was 49.54 billion, but DBM only gave 26.27 billion. So, which is even lower, no, than the 2020 GAA. Because under the GAA 2020, nagkaroon tayo ng 36.68 billion. So there's a variance of around 28.39%.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, ang representasyon po na ito, pinag-aralan din natin ang mga ginagawa ng ibang mga bansa pagdating sa kung paano ba matutulungan ang private education sector. Ang isa po sa mga karaniwan na ginagawa upang mamaksimisa ang pondo na nilalaan ng gobyerno ay ang pagkakaroon ng adjustments sa tuition and other school fees. That way, napapaliit po yung cost of learning ng isang estudyante at napaparami yung na-cover nito ng pondo, ng limitadong pondo na nalalaan para sa sektor ng edukasyon. Sa bahagi po ng DepEd, nais ko pong malaman kung ano ang kanilang current policy pagdating sa determination ng tuition and other school fees sa ating mga private schools at nagkaroon po ba ng mga pagbabago, mga adjustments dito ngayon na tayo ay nasa gitna ng public health emergency?
Mr. Speaker, the private school, every time they request for an increase, kailangan sila dumaan ng proseso. And they have to submit their application for increase or intent to increase the tuition fee at the regional level ng DepEd. So the parents, of course, they have to go through consultation with the parents as well.
May we know, Mr. Speaker,